of service on the Moorhead Public Service Commission as a council liaison as well.
Thank you. Any old business, commissioners? None? Move on to reports. City Council. Chuck?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple things here. Moorhead City Council approved the rebate of 6 months of the 2020 liquor fees for restaurants, bars, and similar establishments. So those checks went out, I believe, this week, or they're upcoming. Clay County received a $1.2 million from the state for COVID small business relief. Now this is the third round, and it's aimed at bars, restaurants, and veterans organizations that were forced to shut down during the most recent state orders. And Clay County is accepting applications until midnight, January 24th. And I'd like to welcome new council members. As Travis said, we have Laura Caroon on the line, and she is the new alternate. And Mel Gilbertson from the First Ward. And I'd like to congratulate Larry Seljevold and Steve Lindos on their re-elections. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is this is Commissioner Durand. I have a quick question. If we can go back to old business.
Sure.
When Councilmember Hendrickson brought up the rebate, that reminded me about a conversation we had regarding utilities and looking at partnerships with business establishments, bars, restaurants, and looking at possible rebates or utility discounts. Have we gone anywhere with that?
Madam Chair, I
Travis?
can speak to that.
Thank you, please.
Yeah, so a good question, Commissioner Durand. We have been working on that. There's some concerns legally with how we approach that. City Manager Molly and I have been talking. Really, what comes down to it is if we open that up for one group of customers, there's a potential that you could have other customers that are looking at it and it could really snowball. And that's the concern we have. I know we're continuing to talk about it, but I think it's kind of, I think it's probably a better question for City Manager Molly. We have been engaging Attorney Shockley as well too on that. So he's been advising us on that.
Okay. Has Fargo moved forward with their proposed or their plan? I know that they were looking at doing something with their bars and restaurants.
Correct. Yeah, they were working on something as well. I have not heard what if they've rolled that out yet. I know they approved something. I don't know where it's at. Again, theirs is going to be a little different because it's going to be just city utilities. It won't include electric. It'd be water, wastewater, and other city services.
Okay. Do we know if any other cities in Minnesota have done anything similar?
I am not aware at this time. I can look into that and get back to you.
It's not urgent, but if you're curious, if you have a chance, that would be great.
Oh, understood.
Thank you.
Oh, very good. Any updates from the Public Service Commission on any committee assignments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the General Manager's report. Mr. Schmidt.
Sure. A couple items on the General Manager's report. I'll have Matt Marks come up. He's our project engineer. He'll speak about our NERC update. This is an annual item we bring up to you as in the GM report. Matt, go ahead.
Project engineer. As a utility, we are under the jurisdiction of the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC for short. And as part of that, there are several standards and requirements that apply to us. various things such as keeping up with our preventive maintenance at our facilities, providing information on our systems at the various voltage levels that we have. Several different things. Overall, there are about 43 standards that we are required to be compliant with. There are an additional 4 that, due to a change several years back, no longer apply to Moorhead Public Service, but as an industry best practice, we continue to be compliant with those ones as well. And then every year, to make sure that we are still complying with all of these, we go through a review of each standard, look at the requirements, make any changes that are needed, and see if any of those have been updated with new requirements or a change to what we're required to do. So this is just kind of an update that we've gone through that process again for 2020, and everything is still going well with those. Are there any questions on that?
One thing to add on that is that throughout the year we have to do self-certifications as well too, that come out through NERC, or the Midwest Reliability Organization, which is the organization under NERC that we have to work with, and we'll have to comply with those and make sure that we self-certify on all those. So usually if there's a concern, they're visiting with us and working through those issues. Yeah, and I would just add that they kind of assign those self-certifications based on a kind of a risk management, which types of utilities are the highest risk or the most significant on something, and that's how they determine which utilities or which requirements to really focus on each quarter. In 2020, with COVID going on, I don't believe they assigned any of those, but as we are kind of getting through that, they have started to assign some for 2021, so we'll be keeping up with those as well. Thank you, Matt. Next item, just state legislative updates. Missouri River Energy Services and Minnesota Municipal Utility Association on our behalf does a lot of lobbying for items that are in the best interest of Moorhead Public Service, really tying to the electric utility, but also the water side as well. I provided those in the agenda for you to review. I get those on a weekly basis, so as we have meetings, I'll probably give you the most recent update. And then there's a state and a national legislative rallies that will occur virtually this year. I'll provide an update at a future meeting on those as well once those occur. Other than that, the other couple items that aren't within the general manager's report, there were some changes to the Missouri River Energy Services Board. Harold Skiebout, a 43-year board chair, was on the board of Missouri River for 43 years. 35 of those, or 34 of those, was as the board chair. Resigned in December, on December 31st, and Don Johnson out of South Dakota was on the board for 43 years and was a vice chair for 25 of those years. They both resigned as of December 31st. Vernell Roberts of Detroit Lakes, he's their general manager there. He is our new chair, and Steve Meyer from South Dakota took over the second vice chair position. They also added 2 new members to the board to replace Harold and Don, Murray Holstein out of Iowa and John Prescott out of South Dakota. There is a requirement through Missouri River to have members from each of the 4 states that Missouri River has members in: Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Just so you're aware of those changes as well too. There was another interesting item that was in the resource that we just received today. XL Minnesota was having a rate case, and they basically removed the rate case, so they were going to adjust over a 5-year period up to about 26.7% was the rate increases for XL Energy. They've removed that, so that was one change that was noted in the MMUA resource as well. Other than that, I will have Mark Moylanen come up. He'll talk about our past due collections based on COVID-19. So he'll give our monthly update on that right now. Mark?
Thank you, Travis. Madam Chair, Commissioners. This is the 9th full month of COVID restrictions, the emergency declaration in the state of Minnesota. The collections still continue to be an issue with the dollar value that's been outstanding. It's grown significantly since February and has really almost tripled through the end of December. At the end of February, prior to the emergency declaration, the past due account balances were about $672,000. As of the end of December, it had grown to almost $1.9 million. This is city and Moorhead Public Service balances. Overall, we're still continuing to see, and every month I state this, that the number of past due accounts is remaining relatively consistent, but the accounts that are past due are growing, and many of them have been past due and unpaid for 6, 7, 8, up to 10 or 12 months now, with last year's cold weather season and this year's continuation of that cold weather season. So there are some tough decisions that are going to need to be made over the next few months once we decide between the City Council and Moorhead Public Service what's the direction we're going to take to try to collect those and what enforcement might be put into place. I could have Travis, if he wants to allude a little bit further, discuss a little bit further his discussions that he's had. I could turn it over for a brief moment if you want.
Yeah, so Chair Thompson, Mayor Judd, and our City Manager Molly, we have been having roughly monthly conversations on how we approach this and how we start to move forward. There's continued talks. We are a non-regulated utility through the Minnesota Public Utility Commission, so we have the abilities to go back to normal collection procedures. We've been watching that very closely and trying to see what was going to happen as of November, December, seeing what the new year, the new administration brings and the changes that those come into play. Continued talks about maybe starting the communication process in February and then allowing for communication to start and potentially starting that disconnection process up back in after the cold weather season is over, April 15th or 14th. Again, that is all tentative right now. We have a meeting later this week, or actually next week, to discuss it again before we make any decisions. Again, that would also come back to the commission for final approval as well. As a board, you'll have to make that approval to start doing the collection process for Moorhead Public Service, as we did when we went into the COVID restrictions.
Okay. Well,
Questions?
Madam Chair, I have the questions, Chuck.
Okay, go ahead.
I missed that. What was the December? Was it 1.7 million, you said?
the total outstanding balance as of December 31st was just under 1.9 million. So it was the 672,000 at the end of February prior to COVID issues coming into play. So it has nearly tripled. And if you look in the write-up, there are approximately 1,600 accounts that account for almost 1.6 million, a little over 1.65 million of that outstanding 1.9 million. So, you know, there's about $230,000 in there that's only 2 to 3 months behind. But once you get beyond that, you know, 1.6 is 4 or more months behind. So again, hard decisions once MPS and the city determine what is the next step. How do we set up collection processes? What type of arrangement or loan, quote loan, offerings or arrangements will be allowed to try and let customers pay that balance over a period of time, anywhere from 12 to 24 months, depending on when.
I have a quick question for you, and it might be a dumb question. It's going to be a totally honest question, but what's the breaking point? That seems like, or
Good question. Really, you in conversations with other utility managers or general managers of utilities in Moorhead, in Minnesota, a lot of them have already gone back to normal operations. Whatever we do is not going to be. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a burden on the customers. It's going to be a burden on staff as well too, to start that process. We do have, again, we have a payment plan arrangement in draft form that once customers are ready to get on that payment plan, that's going to be allowed up to, like Mark said, 24 months of time to get back to a normal balance on their past due balances. The other side of the other part of that too is that we still want to work with the assistance agencies as well. That is still a work in progress. In mid or early December, they shut down that process of applying for past due balances or because of COVID-related issues. There is some new dollars that are currently available through the state of Minnesota. However, they have not rolled out the application or process that they're going to have for that. So we're still waiting to hear more on that as well too. Again, we want to make sure those customers work with the assistance agencies first, and then go through the payment plan process as a second or third resort before they go into actually having us disconnect them to make payments.
And Travis, when you said the new administration, you mean federal, president, the
Correct, yep.
Executive branch, okay. And you didn't see anything because I know the president-elect is talking about 1.7 trillion. You haven't noticed anything for assistance for utilities or anything like that. I haven't read it at all.
Yeah, the one that was late December with the Trump administration, that approved some of those COVID relief dollars to the states. But we just don't know how that's set up and how much money the state of Minnesota has for that yet.
But you don't see anything projected with the Biden administration or anything
I
like
have
that?
not heard or seen anything on that yet. It wouldn't surprise me that the Biden administration does something as well for that. I know there's some talks about COVID sick leave hours that they're already talking about as well too. So I'm sure there will be probably something coming in that as well.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Mark, of those 1,600 accounts that are past due, are most of them, I'm assuming most of them, if not all, are residential?
The vast majority of them are. There might be 50 commercial out of 1,600, so the vast majority are residential.
So of those 50 that are commercial, have we had communications with them, and or are they currently closed their doors, or are they operating? Do we have a sense of what type of commercial businesses they might be? Is there a trend?
The trend is most of them are eating establishments that have been closed down periodically throughout the entire term of this situation.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may. Madam Chair, if I may. I guess I just have a question about the write-off amount. I noticed there was $311,000 that was written off after March 2020. Obviously not being accounted for in the total balance outstanding. Is that write-off just taking those dollars off the books, or is that money that's gone to collections where we may be able to recoup a certain percentage, or is that just there's no way to collect those dollars and they're gone?
I can address that. Yes, those are accounts that the customers have closed. Their accounts have been finalized. They had 60 days, 75 days to make payment or a payment arrangement on their balances. Then they were turned over to a collection agency for further actions. Just for comparison, though, the amounts that have actually been written off, even though our outstanding balances have grown considerably, they're just slightly above our normal write-off thresholds for each of the months. However, that trend has started to increase over the last few months as more and more leases have possibly reached their expiration. Because now that we've been in this for 9 months, a lot of leases were 1 year. We're finding that the residents are leaving with their entire 9 to 12-month electric balance and city charge balances unpaid. And again, I'll give them another 60 to 75 days, and if they're not paid or an arrangement isn't met, then they will be turned over to a collection agency for further action. So there is a chance they could be collected later on down the line.
Well, thank you for that. And maybe just to address Councilmember Hendrickson's question of where the breaking point is. And, you know, I guess I'm extremely concerned that these numbers keep rising every month. and not only for Moorhead Public Service, but for the city of Moorhead as well. And, you know, when we start to potentially discuss the thought of, doing the disconnects in order as a mechanism for enforcement or collection of outstanding balances, I think that's a pretty big policy related question that I guess I would suggest Moorhead Public Service just be in lockstep with the city of Moorhead on, moving that policy direction forward. And I certainly commend General Manager for, the continued meetings with the city of Moorhead and discussing this issue. And it feels like it's already kind of getting out of control, Councilmember Hendrickson, in my mind. And so I would support, some continued discussion of, how we're going to approach moving back towards our existing policy and trying to, I guess, minimize the continued increases in uncollectible amounts here. So just my thoughts, I guess, for the board to consider.
Madam Chair, I have another question and comment. Mark, quick question. I would just like to see the breakdown of how much money those 50 or so commercial operations owe. I know it probably is a small amount of that 1.9 million. I'm just curious to know what that amount is. And then, when we start thinking about disconnecting and sending things to collections, we really need to think about how many people are behind and are being sent to collections because of COVID. And, we might need to start looking at a lobbyist down in St. Paul to get dollars for the utility so that people's credit isn't negatively impacted because of this. And, people normally who would be paying their bills, who would never have an issue, but because of COVID, now they're looking at major credit dings. That's something that, has astronomical, it's got multiple consequences. And it is something that I think we really need to pay attention to down and lobby for down in St. Paul. We need our residents here to have something to help them out, but as well, we need something, from the utility standpoint. We can't continue to go in debt. Well, not necessarily in debt, but, continue to have these amounts increase. I just worry about people's, their financial livelihoods are, I'm not going to say this could financially ruin somebody, but it definitely, can ding a person's credit. And if it's people who are leaving the area, they're going to leave the area and then have negative credit scores. And that just concerns me, I guess. I'd like to think about what we can do down in St. Paul to get some attention to this issue. I know we've had dollars for small businesses, but I think it's time that, there be some dollars set aside for utility payments. If people get another $1,400 in a stimulus check, that's not necessarily going to go towards their utility bill. Hopefully it would, but I'm sure that it's probably not high on somebody's priority list if they're looking at foreclosure or eviction. That's my concern. I hope that we can get some people working with some lobbyists or get some attention down in St. Paul and even in DC.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Commissioner
I would
Daly.
agree with Commissioner Durand, but I would also like to see some accountability. I guess the people who have made some effort, I think they should get some credit for that in itself, because I'm sure that there are many who have made no attempt and not answered phone calls and things like that. Mark, all of these people who owe this money have been contacted, correct?
Automated phone calls, personal phone calls have been made if the account number or the phone number that we have on file is accurate and correct. When we did do personal calls to past due accounts in October, we found that almost a little under a third, the numbers that we had were no longer active or valid or were not being answered, out of service, or they were blocked. So, you know, that's key, is that we only have as good information as been provided to us. And cell phones, for some reason, are a little more movable, and they tend to change more frequently than the old days when people had home phones that they had for years and years and years.
Right.
A lot of our records are from the mid-2000s back to, you know, 2012, 2013, when we had some major conversions, and the phone numbers haven't changed since then, and we're finding a lot of them are no longer accurate.
Completely understandable.
Mark,
Okay.
oh, I'm sorry, were you going to say more, Mary? Okay, Mark, when an account goes into collections and somebody tries to reconnect at a later date, is there a barrier there, or is the balance doesn't carry forward? So if they leave the area, move to Fargo, then try to come back to Moorhead, is there any recouping of that, or how does that work?
Okay, if a customer does leave the service area and their account is sent to the collection agency, if they attempt to reconnect service, we will require them to pay the electric and water balances that they had outstanding, because again, those can be attached with a disconnection. If they had any city services or charges assessed that carried forward, we cannot reattach those back to their new account because we don't have a mechanism to disconnect those services. So, you know, to answer your question, yes, for the Moorhead Public Service side, the electric and water, where there is Department of Commerce concurrence that we can disconnect to recover any charges related to those services, but it does make it difficult to collect the city-related charges.
Chair Thompson.
Go ahead.
Travis here. So a couple, it's a little weird in this room. So a couple things, Commissioner Durand, you asked about lobbyists. We do have MMUA and Missouri River that can, again, help us with that as well. And we have been talking with city staff who have lobbyists down in Minneapolis as well, too, to help assist in that process of trying to get monies for customers so they can complete their, or try to get their past due balances in order. The one, I think the biggest concern we have there is, and I think it's even with the cold weather rule, is we're not seeing a lot of customers apply for that assistance at this time either, whether it's cold weather or COVID. So they're seeing a downtick in the amount of applications. And Mark, I think you can speak to that a little bit more as well too, if you want. And I would agree with Commissioner Paulson's thought process of being hand in hand with City Council. Again, we're talking with City Manager Molly and Mayor Judd as well too, trying to come up with a plan that works and everybody's comfortable with. And again, going to collections is the last resort. It's really when they're no longer a customer of ours. So we're going to try to do everything we can prior to that, whether it's the assistance agencies or the payment plan or disconnections, to try to rectify the situation. But again, looking at other options, you know, really whatever we do, like Commissioner Durand said, is going to be a negative impact on the customer. You know, they may not have the dollars, you know, they may have lost their job, those things. And we have to be, you know, we got to be cognizant of that, but at the same time, they have received services, whether it's city services or MPS services, and try to figure out a way to collect those dollars from those services that were done.
Madam Chair, I have a question on that.
Thank you.
So what is the process for letting people know about those assistance programs? Is it something that people aren't aware that is available?
I can address that. On the back of every paper bill that's sent out and all of the electronic bills, on the back side, there is a listing of the 3 primary agencies that we work with. West Central Minnesota Communities Action, which is our heating and electric assistance agency provider, and they provide the majority of the assistance that is received in the Moorhead area. And their phone numbers are listed on the back of the bills. In November, December, we did send a statement stuffer in every single bill that provided the phone numbers for West Central Minnesota Communities Actions, the local Lakes and Prairies chapter, as well as when it was in play, the Minnesota CHAPS hotline number. But again, they moved the deadline date up on us from late December up to December 7th. So in fact, some of those notices went out after they moved their deadline up, so they became almost useless at that point. But the other two agencies are in play all year long. As Travis alluded to, we're waiting for some more information on the next round of COVID heating assistance or electric assistance, rent assistance, but the details just haven't come out yet from the Minnesota Department of Commerce. Our representative that we've been working with is pretty certain that there's a significant amount of money in there, but again, the details haven't been hammered out. They're hoping that they'll go back as far and allow people to recoup bills going back to March of 2020 when this all started. And I think a lot of what will happen is once we finally get to a point where there's something that's going to happen in terms of disconnections or some kind of action, is that it'll really allow us to work with the customers, because we'll have some definite answers for them and definite deadlines as to when they need to do something. Right now, everything's kind of up in the air because we don't disconnect. Therefore, some of the assistance agencies aren't in a big hurry to take care of us. They're going to focus on the utilities that do have definite disconnection processes occurring right now. So we're kind of on the back burner there, just dealing with our customers as they get to them. And just as example, it's noted in this write-up that West Central Community Action has only approved about half as many clients this year for Moorhead as they did all of last year. In previous years, it was pretty consistent. If we had 1,200, 1,300 customers that were approved at the start of the next year, within the first couple of months, they'd get approved for the new season. But this year, we're only seeing about half have been approved for this season. So again, I'm not sure what is causing that to be a little slower than in the past. But again, once we decide what the next step is and we can get some definite actions in place, I have a feeling that collections will start to fall in line.
This is Commissioner Durand. Mark, I think you're right. I think, that would make sense that, assistance organizations are triaging, the most important cutoff notices. And if we're not giving out any cutoff notices, we're not being triaged to the top. And as I don't like the way it sounds. I don't like, having to agree that we want to start cutting off, but I do think we need to start sooner, probably giving people notice rather than later, so that, before money dries up, I guess. If we're looking at February as a period where we might start sending out disconnect notices, I'm glad that we have another meeting before February. At least I think we do. And so we can see what's going on and what the city is going to be doing. But no, I think you're right that we're not being given priority because we're not sending out any disconnect notices. So it's kind of a catch-22. We don't want to cut people off, but at the same time, we want some attention and we want people, paying their bills and seeking out assistance. So yeah, it's, like I said, kind of a catch-22.
Councilmember Karoun, we did also send out social media posts as well. And if I'm correct, I think we might have put out a press release as well on those COVID assistance or heating assistance numbers so that customers could reach out to those. We're trying multiple different avenues to get the information out to them. And as we go forward, once we know more about the next round of assistance dollars, we would do something similar as well, personal calls, press release, social media posts, things like that. and work with city staff so that they could get them out as well too on their social media pages as well. We've also worked with Downtown Moorhead Inc. and Moorhead Business Association. They're also, re-sharing our posts as well too to hit as many people as we can.
If I could respond to that, just thinking another way of communicating, if folks are getting those, they're getting their statements, but if they're so far behind, they're not even opening them. Maybe there's, just a sticker we could put on the envelope that says, if you need assistance, for those folks that are obviously behind. So maybe it will get them to even open that envelope and to see that information.
Yeah, good idea. Mark, I'll let you work on that one.
Okay, thanks, Travis. Yeah, I'll give you an update next meeting, what we find out, what type of cost and how to implement that. Because again, as we stated, 85% of the accounts are being paid on time. There aren't any issues. It's 15, and so we want to definitely make sure whatever we do is targeted as best as possible and to be cost efficient.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I just have a quick comment here. I want to thank Mark, and I want to thank Travis too for all the hard work. It must be a difficult job, and thank your staff too, because we're in pressing times right now, and I think you've navigated it pretty well. So just thanks again, and I appreciate you working lockstep with the city and Mayor Judd and Dan Molly. I think that's a great partnership, and just continue to keep up the good work. Thanks.
I would echo those sentiments as well. You guys have been amazing through this whole year, and it's been a heck of a year, I know. So kudos, and keep fighting the good fight.
Or Commissioner Daly.
Thank you.
All for my report.
So, okay, great. Moving on to number 9, the approval of the updated Exhibit C Reliability Compliance Service Agreement with Missouri River Energy Services.
Sure, I'll just start this a little bit. I'll have Matt Marks come up and speak to it as well. Again, Missouri River Energy Services is a good partner of ours. We're a member of their utility, and they provide a lot of additional resources for us and assistance. So as we go through some of these projects and processes that we've got to handle, we're able to utilize their staff, not just more public services staff, to handle some of these things. And it's a cost savings piece as well, to have them on board with us. So I'll let Matt speak to that, but overall, it's good to have Missouri River as a member, or as a supplemental power supplier for us, and allow us to be the member so that we can work through some of these bigger issues that would take a lot of staff time to do. Matt, go ahead.
Matt Marks, project engineer. So again, as I had talked about with the NERC requirements, there are several different types of entities that are under NERC's jurisdiction. And Moorhead Public Service is considered a transmission owner as well as a distribution provider. So each of those have their own kind of sets of standards and requirements. Other types of entities are transmission operator and transmission planner. WAPA, the Western Area Power Administration, is our transmission operator. And that has its own set of requirements. For many years, we kind of had an unwritten understanding or unofficial understanding that WAPA was our transmission planner as well. However, they did inform us a few years back that they did not wish to serve in that capacity, in an official capacity, to be our transmission planner. So we fortunately did have Missouri River to assist us, and we put together an agreement that was approved back in May of 2019, Reliability Compliance Services Agreement, that basically states the terms that that Missouri River serves as our transmission planner and handles those TP or transmission planner related requirements on our behalf. The alternative to having them as our transmission planner would be that Moorhead Public Service would have to serve that role by ourselves. There would be additional requirements we would be responsible for. We would have to, kind of the estimate was that we would have to hire an additional employee as well as purchase some additional software in order to be able to keep up with those requirements, the modeling information, things like that. that would sum up to a cost of $150,000 annually. So by entering into this agreement with Missouri River, we were able to avoid that added $150,000 annual cost. The purpose of this updated exhibit that's being presented today is actually relatively straightforward. In the original agreement, the exhibit, it listed all of the standards and requirements specifically that MRES, Missouri River, would be responsible for as our transmission planner. However, as they have entered into agreements with other utilities, kind of came to the understanding that with that setup, every time NERC issues new requirements, new standards, or makes any changes or removals of those requirements, then we would have to go back to the agreement and re-execute it with the new exhibit. So the updated exhibit simply states that Missouri River acts as our transmission planner and handles all of those related requirements. Any questions on that?
One thing to note is that Missouri River does that at no cost to Moorhead Public Service, so there's no additional incurred costs through Missouri River either.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need a motion to approve the report.
So moved.
So moved, okay, by Paulson, second by
Durand?
Durand. So I have a motion by Paulson, seconded by Durand to approve the updated Exhibit C. Roll call vote, Thompson, aye. Daley,
Aye.
McDougal, Durand,
Aye.
Paulson.
Aye.
Okay, the motion is approved. 10 and 11 are consent. And number 12, approve the 2021 pay equity compliance report.
Sure. I'll have Jerry Borman, our accountant and HR coordinator come up and speak to this. Again, this is every 3-year process that we have to go through a pay equity compliance. And I will let Jerry go ahead and speak to it.
Just had to make sure it was on. This is something we need to do every 3 years with the state of Minnesota. Basically, it's just to comply with the Government Pay Equity Act. And pretty much that's just to promote equal pay for equal work. This is a preliminary report. Before I can file it, I need you guys to approve it, and then I'll be able to file it with the state. And then upon compliance, they will send us a certificate, which I'll bring back later. As you can see, we've always been in compliance, and this year again we are. Really, I'm here if there's any questions other than we use Flaherty and Hood, and that's also who we use for our class comp study. So being consistent every year makes it easier with the state of Minnesota. So I'll entertain any questions.
Questions? Seeing none, I guess I'll say thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the report. Okay, I have a motion by McDougal, seconded by
Daley.
Daley, to approve the pay equity compliance report. Thompson, aye. Daley. I didn't hear you, Mary.
Aye.
Durand,
Aye.
Paulson.
Aye.
Okay, so we've now approved the report. I need a motion to, there's no need to close the meeting for executive session. You'll note that the next meeting is February 2nd. That's
Yep, we plan to have the meeting on February 2nd.
And motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming. Stay well. See you next month.
Thank you, Madam Chair.